Refresher, at this chair.
Over. Thank you. All right. Welcome everybody to the second episode of House Energy and Digital Infrastructure on Thursday, January 23rd. We are joined here today by Secretary Riley Hughes of the Agency of Digital Services. And per our protocol, we'll quickly introduce ourselves and ask folks who are in the room to identify themselves, and then we'll turn to you, and we're really looking forward to learning all about your agency. So I'm Representative Kathleen James from Manchester.
Scott Campbell from St. Johnsbury, Calvary, Essex District.
Richard Bailey, Lamoille 2.
Chris Morrow, Wyndham, Windsor.
Michael Southworth, Caledonia 2.
Christopher Howland, Rutland 4.
Darren Torrey, Washington 2.
Graham Kleffner, Chittenden 13, Burlington.
Lars Villia, Wyndham 2.
Jolie Burchett, World Strategies, Naval Technologies.
I'm Andrea Delaware, Deputy Secretary for Digital Services.
And I'm John Kelly, Chief Staff of Digital Services.
Thank you. Sorry about the carbon. Yeah. We have a little detector, so don't be alarmed. For the record.
So for the record, I'm Denise Riley Hughes. I'm the Secretary for the Agency of Digital Services, and I'm also the State CIO, so that's Chief Information Officer. I'm from Southern Vermont, so it's nice to see you. I may have you pass me.
Town?
Cavendish.
Awesome.
Nice.
Yeah. I have been with the state 2 years, almost exactly. And I was appointed in September of 23 as the CIO and secretary. And prior to that, I was deputy. And so over the last 2 years, I have done very similar to what I believe this committee is going to start doing, which is get a lay of the land. And what is it that's going on? And what is it that we need to fix? What are the burning issues? And what are the things that need to go on the list to resolve once some of the burning issues are taken care of? So I do have a background in tech from the private sector. So I spent almost 25 years in tech working with various organization types, but primarily the last 10 years was with state government. And I have spent extensive time with Vermont and the other New England states in transforming their organization, primarily around each one of them went to a centralized IT model. So I'm really familiar with some of the challenges and some of the successes that have been had, and the importance of why that has happened across the country and why it's a benefit for Vermont. And so over the last 2 years, I've worked on some operational improvement and operational efficiencies, and I expect now that we do have a committee of jurisdiction, which by the way, we're very happy about. I'm excited to be working with you all, that we have an opportunity to have some more meaningful conversations around the work that we do and the work that we are set out to accomplish for the state and for Vermonters. So I did have a chance to listen to a couple minutes this morning, so I understand that this is all kind of new. Who are we? What do we do? Why are we here? And I did send a slide deck. Great. And we don't have to go through it. The reason why I sent it is read it in your time. There's going to be things that pop up on there that you're going to have questions about, but we can't cover it all in one short session. So I want to make sure that what we do talk about today hits the key points so that as we meet next and as we continue to meet through this session, that I can bring specific things that are very important to you and that are very important to us that we can hopefully accomplish in short order. So one of the things that I had heard is that you were reading through the statute and who is ADS, why were we created, what is our purpose, what are we doing? And my goal is I really hope that you don't feel like you have to be technologists in being on this committee. That gets to be our job, but what I do want to do is make sure that we can translate it into a way that it makes sense for all of you, because you all have a lot more important things to do than learn tech that will likely change in a year or two. So, yeah.
I do have a question for you. So thanks so much for submitting the slide deck. I appreciate it. We do have a decent amount of time with you this morning. Do you feel that we need to skip it entirely or?
No, I don't think we have to skip it entirely. But I did have John Kelly put numbers on the slide so that we can point to the specific numbers and jump to those as we need to.
Okay, because to the extent that we can, to go through a very basic intro to ADS and
Yes.
your mission and your work, I think that's what we had, where we had hoped we could start. And so jumping ahead to sophomore year might not be where we're at right now, if that's okay with you.
No, that's
I don't want to
perfect, yeah.
interrupt your,
No, that's exactly,
Your
I
flow.
think we're aligned.
okay.
Yes, but there's a lot of information in here.
Would you like me to share my screen and keep it up there?
If you don't mind, and that's, like I said, I don't want to have you shift what you're doing, but to the extent that we can really start at ground one, that'd be super.
Perfect, and I'll let you know the slide numbers if I have to jump around. So ADS was formed in 2017, first under executive order, and then it went into law, I believe that same year. And it was, as Representative Spelia had said earlier, which was that we had a lot of disparity. There were many different teams and tech organizations that were in existence across the state, all doing something a little bit different. And this was an opportunity to, one, standardize, to reduce the cost of technology, and also formulate some sort of consistency and simplification around what it is that we're doing, so that ultimately, and this is my words, ultimately we can provide a consistent user experience for Vermonters. We need to make sure that when Vermonters are working with the government, that it's not a different experience in every single department and agency that they engage with. So the mission and vision is something that when it was created in 2017 is this is a long-standing vision. I don't see us altering or changing from this. It still holds true today. And so I think that it speaks to what I just said, which is what our obligations are on being able to work together with our partners in state government to be able to provide these intuitive, simplified, accessible technology solutions for Vermonters. And security is a big part of that. And when I say accessibility, it's not just being able to find it and push the button, it's also being able to make sure that everybody, regardless of how they can access it, has a chance to access it. So it's ADA accessibility as well. And I guess we can flip to the next one. So I introduced this last year when I had a chance to submit the first strategic plan. There are 4 strategic focus areas that everything that we do has to align to. And it's supported by our mission, it's supported by all of our objectives, and I think it makes it pretty simplified that as we work with the partner agencies and as we work with legislature, that there should be no misunderstanding, and it's not technical. So user experience is one of those areas. And I think that we've made some pretty strong inroads in that, where I don't know, through the pandemic, if any of you had to register for, things and portals, we took that as an opportunity to say, well, if we're registering everybody here, why not have it be the same when we launch the DMV portal? Why not have it be the same? And so being able to create a central entry point that no wrong door, but it's a single open door that can access everything. We're at the starting point of that. We will always have a level of technical debt that exists, but being able to reduce that over time is important.
Representative Sebelia?
What does technical debt?
Technical debt is when we invest in technology and it degrades and becomes outdated over time, then it is considered technical debt. And so it would end up costing us more to keep it going than it would replacing it. And technical debt can also be categorized in systems that no longer align to the needs of government. And so if we are limited in our processes and limited in our ability to deliver services to Vermonters, because of the gaps in the technology, that's also considered technical debt.
Okay, I think you had to follow on and then,
Follow up too.
okay.
Secretary Riley Hughes, you said we will always have a level of technical debt. Why do you say that?
Because technology changes every day.
So it's not, so I don't want to put words in your mouth, so what does that mean? It's not possible to keep up?
It's not that it's
too
not
expensive?
possible, it's that it's a journey. It's not, there's no end point to that change. And so when you're in the tech space, you have to expect that there's going to be change. This could come in the form of a security flaw that's identified in something that's 10 years old. And we either have to fix that flaw or there is no fix and we have to shut the system down. But technology changes every day.
So is there any way to project the amounts or to curtail those amounts year to year? So you say 10 years from now, you can foresee that this is going to be part of that technical debt? And is there anything that you can do prior to that to offset that debt?
Yes, not at 100%. So there's some things that we can't predict. We had this conversation with an individual yesterday around artificial intelligence, where it is moving so fast that we realistically can't predict where it's going to be in 5 years and 10 years from now, but we can at least plan for it. And so to answer your question, the way to get a handle on that is, one, have some solid internal operating processes. Standardizing is a good way of starting at that as well. And to be more in a proactive, predictive model around technology than in a reactive model. If we're putting out fires all the time, we will never be able to get to the point that you talked about where we could at least plan for what tomorrow will bring.
Rep. Kleckner?
So for consumers, wanting to go to the Department of Ag, they can go straight to the Department of Ag, they can come in through the state website. No wrong door, as you said. How important is it on the back end that the DMV system and the Department of Ag system be able to talk to each other?
It would be important that we have the appropriate guardrails in place if we want to enable them to talk to each other, or if we want to ensure that they can't talk to each other. But that all is part of the enterprise architecture plan as we go into these projects, and making sure that there's some consistencies there too, so that we know when you are coming into a system or connecting into a system, are we opening the door for external users to do that? Are we opening the door for internal users? Do we need to ensure that there's privileged access? So almost like the golden key, right? You only want to give the golden key to a couple of people, and if you don't have that, you can't get past this door. That's how we look to model the architecture.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, one more and then we'll let you move forward.
Since you're already off, you're interrupted. What I'm really wondering about is, and you're going to get to this, I know, but the more general question about how consolidation is going with ADS, with consolidating IT in the agency, and to what extent you are seeing friction points with other agencies and departments, or seeing efficiencies, force reduction, people who don't have to do stuff in other agencies. So just something that I have in mind here.
And if that's coming, if that's to TBD in your presentation, that's great. I do want to make sure we get through.
Sure. So this is, now you can understand why I was like, oh, maybe
Yeah.
but we won't cover everything.
That's okay, I'll try to.
And we'll have a chance, I know that we'll have a chance to work together often over the session. To answer your question is that if somebody found the secret sauce on prioritization in a government world, it would be perfect and we would be meeting everybody's needs. The challenge that we have is there's a lot of pulls and pushes that change the prioritization of the work that we're doing. But I would say from a modernization standpoint and what the state of Vermont set out to do, one, in creating the agency, two, in consolidating, I think that we've done a really great job. We went through our first phase of maturity as an agency starting out. We are in that next phase, which is more about refinement, consolidation, and consistency. And so that's where these 4 areas, and you can see that simplifying and reducing complexity brings us to that point. If we are adding complexity because somebody has the desire to do something that works for them and not everybody else, that is likely where we're going to have some conversations around. I understand that that may work for you, but now let's look at the whole picture. And so we do have those conversations often, but if it's a focus area around simplification, we usually can always get to the point where we're all on the same page. And I would say from a partnership with the agencies, I think it's stronger than it's ever been. We've worked very hard at that, Deputy Secretary and I, over the last, she's been here just over a year, I've been here 2 years, and we've seen a marked difference.
Okay, great. Something we're gonna be thinking about as we go. Thanks.
The standards also, so that is architectural design standards, these are technology standards, these are coding language standards, these are security standards, user experience standards. So everything that we're talking about, being able to at least have a baseline to start from so that we know when we're deviating. If you don't have a standard and you don't have a foundation to start with, it's really hard to be able to know if it aligns or doesn't. And that's something that I hope over time that this committee and the Agency of Digital Services will work with to understand, not from a deep dive technical, but more from a goal and intent around standards. And we'll talk through where we've been able to accomplish that between ADS and the legislature over the last couple of years. And the last is predictability, and I think this one for us is really important when we start talking about budgeting, cost, performance, and overall IT spend, which is one of those areas of responsibility that we have as well. We have seen, because of the way that Bulletin 3.5 reads, we've only been an agency for just under 8 years. We're starting to see over the last few years contracts that we didn't have visibility in when we were DII come to their end of life. And so when we start looking at what ADS is responsible for, it almost looks like, whoa, you're spending a lot more money of the states on technology. And the reality is we just have more visibility into it. And so with that visibility now comes establishing and providing the standards, which will reduce over time. I wish I had just an easy yes no answer for things, but I'm trying to avoid going super technical on our architecture, and I avoid talking about products specifically because we dealing with vendors, and also when we start talking about the products that we use and how we configure that is the risk, because we can download our YouTube destination, you could have to try to convert from something like that. I'm trying to go to the strategic plan that I think really some of those 4 areas. We're working to enhance our key performance indicators as well, so we can have more mature measures around performance and impact to the market. So to share with you what makes up the 389 positions that are under the digital services, we have 6 different divisions, and this work chart on slide 6. First, at a high level, we are security division, which is, if you think of the Department of Public Safety and they have the resources there, our security offices, state systems versus that. We have a chief information security officer who runs the division, and they are on tap for intrusion prevention. They are responsible for protecting and securing the systems. This is also an area where I don't think that it has been explicitly stated, security is non-negotiable. We don't get an option to choose security in a system. And so over time, what I'd like to make sure that we do is be able to track the percentage of security spend in our overall technology, both investment and and consumption. That is something that I think that with other states, we're starting to see that the lower the percentage of security to overall technology, the higher the risk and the higher the breach that exists. And so we want to make sure that we reduce that.
Yes.
Is there a best practice percent of overall spend that you should be spending on security?
I don't think there is a best practice, but as we start looking at some of the trends and trends both within government and adjacent organizations, I think that we'll get a better sense of that. But it is something that is a bit emergent in the industry. When I look at something like a public safety or a tax where you have federal compliance requirements around data security and data restrictions, you would see that that percentage would increase as opposed to maybe something like finance and management, where all of those numbers are there. It's usually all public record. They're not dealing with compliance data. And so I guess it will sometimes vary by department, but it's still, we would consider it non-negotiable. So we have our enterprise architecture division, and that's the division that our chief technology officer runs. That is where we set the architectural standards around technology, whether or not it's on-premises technology that's in our hosted data center, or if it's in the cloud, where things connect and how they connect, and also the standard platforms that we're using for certain things. Like, let's say if there's a high volume of need for case management, 80% of the requirements for case management should all fit into what our enterprise platform would be. There's always going to be an exception. And so we would like to see less of an exception than more. But with the deviation to, if it doesn't fit into that standard, we just want to make sure that we track it as that anomaly, but that anomaly shouldn't be the standard, if that makes sense.
Are you talking about case management across state agencies and departments? So if DFC needs case management and somebody else needs case management, that 80% of that should be, okay, this is the dating. Okay.
Yes. And the teams have done a really good job as funding has become available for these new systems, that there are, I believe that there are 9 departments and agencies in what we would call our enterprise platform for case management. Okay. So data management and artificial intelligence, this is a division that is very new for us, just a few years old. We were the first state, and this is something that you'll probably hear me talk about a lot. We're very excited that we were the first state to have a director of artificial intelligence. And shortly after, some other states have followed. But when you look at the work that we have done, we have influenced either executive order, law, process, or statute for other states. And I think that we're up to about 47 other states that we have had that influence on, which is pretty impactful for a tiny little state like Vermont and a tiny little division that we have there. But the work that they've done has been incredible. And I believe that you heard that the report was just published. One of the requirements that we have in that division is to provide an inventory of all of the AI automation systems that are running throughout state government. And last year, our report showed 24. This year, I believe that we're up past 37. And so it's nice that we track it so that it's that knowledge that's needed around where are we building automation. And if we are looking at artificial intelligence, are we tracking it and are we controlling and managing where we allow it to be? That's going to be really important in the continued growth of this emerging area.
These reports on our committee page.
I believe John
It was
sent.
shared. I don't know if you put it on your page, but it's on the legislative reports page.
Great, thank you.
And I can send it after.
That'd be great, just to make sure. We're just trying to make sure that all the reports, as a new committee, not everything reached us. So
Okay.
if you send it, we'll make sure it's posted on our page as well. Thank you.
Our finance division is our business office. And so this is the area that we're looking at driving some some improvements and enhancements in over the next 2 years. This is our business operations. This is the team that comes in and they pay all the bills, they take in all the invoices, they send out the invoices and charges back to the agencies. We have been able to bring in new positions that didn't exist over the last 18 months. One of them is a professional development manager. So we've never actually focused on how we skill up our tech staff and keep up with the technology that we are taking on. The other part is when you become an agency, you don't allow those legacy institutions to continue to exist, because what have we accomplished if we allow that to happen? And so with the business office being able to focus on that professional skills development, if we have 389 staff and we're supporting 10,000 users and X number of departments, agencies, also the elected offices, is going to be really important that we can bring the right skills where it's needed, when it's needed. And so that is a growth focus for us in that space. We also are actively recruiting right now for a vendor manager. And so what a vendor manager should really do is make sure that we have consistent partnerships with the right vendors, that they are doing what they said that they would do for the state, hold them accountable, drive consistencies within our contracts, and also make sure that they can negotiate the appropriate rates so that we're not continuously paying retail, or that we're not paying top dollar because we buy things incrementally. We want to make sure that if we have an opportunity to take advantage of the economies of scale, that we do so in a meaningful way. It's a lot. We have a lot going on.
Yeah.
We're touching everybody. Yeah. So we are definitely working with every agency. If there is technology involved, we are working with them. And I would say 9 times out of 10, technology is involved.
Yeah.
Is the integration of the legacy agencies complete, or is that still in progress?
So that is the last bullet on the list, which is the enterprise services division. So we consolidated this group in the beginning of FY24. They were still independent and working independently. And so for the last year, we've been working to continue them as enterprise services. So they're all one unit. And this has taken what was shared services, which was the group that I think fell under DII back in the day, and the embedded teams, and they are now under one organization, all reporting to the Deputy Secretary.
How much of the actual work of building the systems is done by third-party vendors, how much is in-house?
We don't have that statistic. That's a good question.
Yeah.
We do try to do it in-house as much as possible, especially when we're driving our enterprise platforms. But from a prioritization standpoint, we don't want to say no if the funding is there and we can get it up and running, or that there's a deadline to have something done within 12 months or 24 months. We do have some key partners that we bring in. We've worked with the Office of Procurement and Contracting. I was going to say OPC, but I'm trying so hard not to say acronyms. We have a retainer pool, which is what the contract vehicle is, but that is vetted partners that we already have an established master services agreement with, that we typically tap for, I don't want to call it staff aug, but let's call it a support extension to our team. But we run the projects. We are the lead on those projects. We don't outsource the sponsor roles or the lead roles in any of the projects. We also have all of them published on the Enterprise Project Management Office, the EPMO webpage. So there's a dashboard that we update daily that shows, I think right now there's 67 projects or 60 something projects that are listed in there in various stages of completion. And so that you can see which ones are going well. We color coded them. That dashboard improvement over the last year and a half has been a result of, we had an audit through the auditor's office prior to me joining. And so we took a lot of the feedback that aligned to where we're trying to support the state and work to improve those. And so that's one of those areas.
Yeah. Following up on Howard's question about how far we're getting to transitioning to the old structure where each agency and department can handle their own to ADS now managing things. I guess this is something I'm concerned about or wondering about is to what extent is ADS additive to state government? What extent is it consolidating previous services? What I recall from when I was on energy technology 6 years ago with Rep. Sevilla, it seemed to me that what I'm recalling is that ADS was drawing people who in other agencies and departments who were working on tech into working in effect for ADS, but still working in these other agencies. Is that what's still going on, or talk about that a little bit?
No, they're all working under one ADS. There are folks that are assigned based on the operating environments that we need to keep things up and running. So AHS is always a good example because they're pretty big. The Medicaid systems. So we have engineers and teams that are trained and specialized in that space that work on those systems, keeping them up and running. We do have partners that we work with in that space too that work in conjunction.
These are ADS hires.
These are ADS.
Not AHS hires. Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
We are working
And
with.
these are displacing people that used to work at AHS.
They were position IDs that were under the AHS agency. Those same position IDs and those same people are under ADS. I should say that. I mean, some of them are. Some have retired.
It takes time, right?
Yeah.
I guess I'm wondering how this process is going.
I think it's going really well. I think that we are. You're hopefully the next time we meet, you're going to hear some marked changes that we are making in the short term in order to drive some of those areas that I was sharing with you about, namely in the standards and the predictability.
That's in what?
Predictability and standards.
For standards.
Yeah, which does impact from an alignment standpoint. It will ensure alignment is centralized under ADS.
Yeah. Okay. And do you feel like you spend an enormous amount of money on IT, right? I mean, I guess everybody does, but it's just kind of shocking to see, tens of millions of dollars getting spent on developing an independent system. I just can't even conceive of how that's possible, but I'm hoping that having a robust agency that's overlooking these things is going to help rein in.
Yes.
At least limit the increase in those costs. And so that's my overall. Yeah.
So the heads of the divisions that I have outlined, and the only one I didn't cover was ETMA, but I think I glossed over them enough. They run all of the projects. We're also bringing on change management into that organization because these projects the goal isn't tech. The goal of these projects is outcome for Vermonters.
Sure.
And so as we really look to focus the intent around the user, the service, and the Vermonter, the tech should be informed by that. And that's the work that we're doing. With each of these divisions, over the last 2 budget cycles, I have brought each one of the chiefs in to understand and know and be accountable to the budgets in those given areas. They are also responsible for reducing those budgets. So we need to find areas where there's overspend, there's duplicative spend, and we capture that. And there's a rolling number that we present every year around cost savings, cost recovery, and we're also starting to track cost mitigation. We're also looking at where the duplication of purchases are. So as I look to sign invoices, if it's coming up into my purview and they expire tomorrow and someone's going to shut the service off, well, that's a little too late, right? So now I'll sign it one more time, but we already have this service here. And so you're going to spend the next 6 months moving off of that so that we can save that money. And so those are things that we're actively working on. It's a little bit, I don't want to call it dirty laundry because that's not really a good indication, but going into the details on that probably is a little bit not as,
That's fine. Good. Sorry.
Yep, we're gonna take one more, and then I want to make sure that we allow you time to get through your slideshow,
you.
because we're gonna be having a lot of meetings
Yes.
with you, I'm sure. So Representative Kleppner?
Yes.
Tech is so fun. I'm gonna ask 1,000 questions. But I'll just ask one and we'll save the other 999 for our next meeting.
Sounds like a plan.
What is your kind of general philosophy about a software that you want to host and software that you want up in the cloud?
I came into this agency as a cloud first agency. That was the structural model that was already established. Given where the industry is going and the availability of hardware and being able to manage hardware, have the skills to manage hardware, really not a business that we should be in as a small state. So it makes sense for us to be cloud first. We have some really strong skills in that space from our technology staff to be able to do so. And we've also created enough of a balance where we're not using one cloud. We have some business continuity built into how we have the environments running so that if you put all your eggs in one basket, your risk rating goes up. We want to make sure that we have a little bit of a balance there.
Thank you.
I think too, I was talking with Senate GovOps yesterday, and capital expenditures versus operating expenditures. I think one of the challenges that we're running into that makes the replacement system sound so high is because way back when we made major hardware capital investments and in hardware and software that stayed on the machine in the data center, and the requirement for that capacity has grown incredibly. A lot of that hardware doesn't exist anymore. And so in order to replace it, you're having to either make a huge capital expenditure again, or you try to build some sustainability in operating expenditures. And I think cloud allows us to do that from a consumption standpoint. And it gives us a little bit of agility to turn on and turn off some of these services as we need to. So it hopefully gets us out of that technical debt game over time. So slide 7 it's a little bit of a snapshot, but it gives a view of from a couple layers down, what are the different services that we are providing across the state. And I don't want to go through the list, but you can see it's pretty extensive. And this overall, when we look at these services, I would call these our core services. These are the things that we do for everybody. Regardless of who you are. And as I had said, it is executive branch, and I know that you heard that this morning. We're also the IT arm for the elected offices. So state's attorneys and sheriffs, we support them. I do believe that they have an IT staff or two, Secretary of State's office, AG's office, treasurer. So we are supporting all except legislative and judiciary. We still do support judiciary in smaller senses, but they were able to move to their own network a year or so ago.
Yep.
Level of coordination, conversation, collaboration between the other two branches and ADS. Regular meetings, anything.
We connect with each other a lot on email. We all have very different missions and we all have a lot different responsibilities. So, where we do align on is like we just released our security standards policy. It was an update. It wasn't a policy before. It is a policy now. So I shared that with them. We have an opportunity to meet on Monday to go through that and other things that we're seeing around where's the impact to government, where are we seeing some, foreign adversaries trying to impact states because we are a vulnerability. And those are things that we share. Our technical staff works a lot closer together on a day-to-day basis.
And how about the constitutional officers?
I know.
So Secretary of State, Treasurer's Office.
Oh, gosh.
Attorney,
I mean,
There.
we support them. They're in our environment.
all of them.
Often, yes. So each one of them has an enterprise services director assigned to them. So they're working regularly with their director, which those folks were the former embedded CIOs.
So elections is a joint responsibility,
Oh,
security
yeah.
between you and
Yeah.
Secretary of State.
Yes, I was.
I think
in the
that's
war
new
room with
actually
them.
from.
Yes. Yes, we have a very strong partnership with Secretary of State. So we worked, about 6 months prior to the election was where we did a lot of the heavy lifting work there. And it was pretty amazing coordination. The word boring was used when we actually got to election day because the team had done so much work together between public safety, the Secretary of State's office, the partner that hosts the election systems for them, and EDS. So it was really a team effort.
Are they required to use you or do they elect to use you?
They elect to use it.
Another question that I want to just throw out there, I don't want you to answer it now, but it's what is our responsibility to work with other critical sectors in the economy that aren't state government, like utilities, hospitals and things like that. But talk about that later. It's just.
I think when we get a chance to dig in a little bit on the Cyber Advisory Council, which is something that Rep. Sibilia really was critical in helping us move forward, that council's been in place for a year and a half. Their first report was issued, or our first report was issued, and it's really focused around critical infrastructure. When that community first met, it opened the door to an opportunity to work together that had never existed before. And it's been nothing but positive. And I think with the new commissioner of public service department, we're also talking through what does tomorrow look like for this team. And as he's working with, his organization and his responsible critical infrastructure organizations, building consistency so that we do have a better bridge of support for them.
Great, thanks.
Can you make sure we have that report?
Yeah. I think that'll be included.
Yeah, I'm done as well, but it was all sent to.
It's already sent. Okay, great.
When I submitted.
And
They're on our webpage.
how often do they meet?
They're meeting every other month at this point. Yes, and we
Is
do
that
have a web.
public meeting?
It is. We have a web page on the Agency of Digital Services site that, gives an overview of the council, the members of the council as well, and the Teams link for the meetings.
Thanks. I do see your report on our page.
Perfect. It works fast. Do you have any questions about any of these services? Okay. So on the cybersecurity side, I think I covered this before. Really what they're working on is that intrusion detection and prevention. And I think that we've spent a lot of time working on reactive response. And we need to get more into setting a high baseline for what security looks like. And that intrusion detection and prevention is really a way to do so. So making sure that we have the right technology in place at the front of the connection so that we don't open ourselves up to unnecessary risk. when it comes to the sectors, sometimes critical infrastructure, sometimes not, where we have Vermont organizations that have been impacted by cyber attack. If they are connected somehow into state systems, we know. And that's one of the partnerships that we have with the VIC, which is the Vermont Intelligence Center. And our Chief Information Security Officer, John Toney, works really closely with that team over there. So we make sure that I'd rather be safe than sorry, right? We're going to shut off your connection, and you're not going to have access to state systems. And sometimes people get a little antsy about that, but we have an obligation to protect all Vermonters. And if a 5-minute disconnection of access gives us that security, we're going to make sure that we do that. And with our security monitoring, we do have a third-party company so that we can ensure that it's 24/7. And the organization is a Vermont company.
Madam Chair, this is something that I'm very interested in us understanding, kind of what happens and when, who's notified, at what level folks are notified. And I hope it's something that we might be able to take more testimony on this session if possible.
I do have a request for that, because typically when we have security conversations, we will go into executive session.
Great.
In order to do so, I would ask that you share what your rules of operation are in executive session.
Okay.
As one of the requests would be that there's no note taking and there's no recording of the conversation. It is an area that is critical to Vermont safety. And I think if you're not in that space, it doesn't seem as important. And it is. It's very, very important. And so confidentiality and restricted access to this information is important. And so executive session would need to be treated of the utmost care.
Understood. That's important.
May I add? So just, just in terms of my interest, it is really around the legislature's role as oversight. We certainly, are not doing the job of the administration. It's important to me that we understand, in the event of a serious event, how the legislature, and specifically, this is something I've been asking for many years, how the speaker is notified. She's, so, and when. And then if there's a breach, when we would be notified and with what information. So, and I understand the sensitivity and, hope that we can treat this very seriously, but I think we have a role to understand some pieces of information.
That's right. I think that's an important point to bring up, because as a brand new committee, it's important that we understand that we do have an oversight role, that we can't shirk that. So, so we'll be back to you on that.
Yeah. And I just want to interject. I think we need to be very cautious about overstepping what our roles are.
Yeah.
And keeping the security top notch and not interfering with that.
100% agree.
Agree.
And so, too, so our deputy CISO, our CISO, myself, and chief of staff are all secret clearance authorized through Homeland Security. And so that's part of that. There are certain parameters that we have to take to be able to even have access to some of the information that we have access to. We were very lucky to get our CISO. He is former Secret Service. He's former Homeland Security. So he's got a lot of experience in that space that has been an incredible value to us, especially as we look to improve our operations and mature.
Super. So we have about 15 minutes left. So whatever you think.
Perfect. So covered cyber. We talked a little bit about the Cyber Advisory Council. There are some recommendations that came out of those that I think we'll have an opportunity to talk at in subsequent meetings. There was also a survey that was done across the critical infrastructure areas in Vermont. And there were a couple of others that aren't listed in our current statute that did respond as well. And so you can see that report. Overall, what it's showing is what we had expected is that we have a lot of work to do. What you'll see in that space as well is a grant. It is a Homeland Security grant that is the state and local cyber grant program. And they made it really long. It took me about 6 months to finally get SLCGP done and have all the words in the right order. But basically what it is, it's a pretty valuable funding grant program from the federal government for our municipalities. And when you look at the number of municipalities across Vermont that are actually on critical infrastructure, it is incredible and immense. And so as an extension of state government, we do have an obligation to make sure that they have a baseline level of security too. And so we are right on the cusp of launching the services that were approved through the first year program. And we are in the process of submitting the second year program, which each one comes with a couple $2 million going directly to municipalities for cybersecurity. And so you'll hear more about those programs in the future. That is the program that I had an opportunity, and not many CIOs have an opportunity to bring back former CIOs, but Sean Naylor, who has worked for the state for 37 years, retired, and he agreed to come back in a part-time capacity to run this program. And so it's been highly valuable for us, especially because he was part of the conception of how Vermont was going to use these funds for the municipalities. He's also heavily involved in the Cyber Advisory Council. And he's been working with a number of the universities across the state right now for how they can play a role in supporting a whole of state approach. So more to come on that, but we're doing some pretty amazing things in that space. On the data and AI front, you will find that we have a published code of ethics. That is one that is a good example of what's been repeated across the state. It's a pretty comprehensive code of ethics, and I would recommend that you get a chance to read it. Please do so. It gives a user guide around what would be acceptable use and what would not. And it doesn't require users to be technologists, like I said, but it does require them to think about what they're doing and with what data they're doing it with. So you think of ChatGPT, which is a public tool. You don't want to put restricted information in there. You don't want to put private information in there, because once you do, it's in there and you can't take it out. We launched an internal ChatGPT, which is an OpenAI tool for internal state government to use, which we can put, pre-public or sensitive information in if necessary. And it's got a restricted user access to it. But it is something that we have, we piloted with the Agency of Digital Services, and now we've opened it up to other agencies to use. And the guidelines as well. So we do have a state employee guidelines. I do not believe that was adopted by judiciary or legislature, but that's something that, as we look at how the branches work together, and if we can have some consistencies in that space, I'd love for them to be engaged. The other pieces, if you get a chance to look at the IT project dashboard, you can look and see what the projects are. You'll see the name of the project, you'll see the agency that's represented, you'll see the different stage, what % complete is in there. There's a lot of information out there. We're in the middle of overhauling our website, and it is overdue for an update because there's a lot of words with hyperlinks in them, but it's not what I would consider to be accessible. It's not very user-friendly and comprehensive. About a year ago, the Department of Justice released a mandate for state and local governments to meet what's called Title II compliance around accessibility for the ADA compliance. We have until, I believe, October of this year to meet those Title II requirements. we have done some, and these are things that we didn't project. You know, you don't see these things coming, but if you can foresee that, was it the right thing to do back then, or were we just meeting minimum requirements? We're trying not to meet bare minimum requirements because tomorrow will already be out of date. And we have about 160,000 web pages that exist under Vermont.gov. That's excessive. And so ADS is the team responsible for managing the framework of that. We have a hosted partner that hosts most of those websites in a cloud data center. But our chief marketing officer creates the standard for the template as far as the logo that you're allowed to use, the colors that you're allowed to use, being able to have some consistencies there. So that creates the standard user experience. But from a content standpoint, the content is owned by the agencies. So they manage their own content. We provide the template, and we know that it's approved by the chief marketing officer. What we are doing the overhaul on is a number of those sites were published with content, but there was no review to ensure that they were compliant. And ADA compliance needs to make sure that it works both on a laptop, desktop, a mobile device. It's got language translation services. It also has, visual and hearing impaired service offerings embedded within the web page. So that's a pretty big internal overhaul that we're doing right now. That is not, you're not going to see that as a project because it is, it's not funded. It is just something that we all just have to do.
We'll talk to you about this later, but it seems like all US agencies are to be meeting a certain standard of usability, user friendliness.
Yes.
So being able to filter data, for example, sort data, things like that.
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks.
Well, we have 5 to 8 minutes. Perfect. Repellent?
You said the chat GPT, it's on there forever. Is there any sunset rules or sunset provisions needed so that you may and or can remove outdated stuff?
Not in AI algorithms that are hosted to the public. So that is something that the AI division is working on, both with other states. I don't expect to see any federal standards coming forward, but it is something in Vermont that we are working towards, and starting with a more collaborative regional approach across other states in the Northeast is going to put us in a better position because I think we're all very closely aligned.
You mentioned the audit just asked about, and on page 24, this was under your predecessor, the state. It says, in response to our draft report, ADS not commit to implementing most of the recommendations. Blah, blah, blah. ABS does have the authority to implement our recommendations, but in light of their response, we recommend the legislature consider the statutory changes contained in Exhibit 11. It contains 3 recommendations for us to consider. This is a couple of years old, so I know when you mentioned the dashboard that we're looking at was one of these recommendations. So obviously you've read and considered the recommendations of the audit. Do you have any comment about that, and this might be a future meeting, recommendations for the legislature to help you do your job?
For the latter question, I would say future conversation. For the recommendations, each one of the recommendations is aligned to something that we've been working towards, but it does take time. And unraveling decades of the past, of somebody else's past that we acquired, it's almost like doing an acquisition of a company. What do you keep and what do you not? We don't have an option not to keep certain things. And so as we go through this new layer of our new stage of maturity, I think that we will find that
all of those will be met in time. It's a matter of when they start versus when they don't. And we actually have had a follow-up with the auditor, and I believe that they are doing a final review now of the progress that we've made.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. So current projects, I think this is something that we'll be talking about more often. The ERP project is one that has kicked off. I think that prior to me coming here, that's been something that's been underway for a number of years. There's a number of reasons why this needs to happen, but one, and you will find this, the current system does not meet the requirements of state government. And I shouldn't say systems. They are all out of date. They are all in various stages of out of support, and they are holding us back from being able to accomplish the work that we need to accomplish. So when you look at budgeting is a good example. We do most of that work on spreadsheets. We don't have automated reporting. We can't track year over year trending on if certain programs, services, grants are working and operating in a certain way. We need that type of technology today. That's how we're operating. That's how you guys are operating. And that's how we need to be given the access to do so. And so that's just one example. The other is from an employee perspective, being able to have your employment records, your timesheet, everything at your disposal, at your hands, however you work and in what environment. Important, really important. But because it's a project that really transforms the operations of state government, it's something that Secretary Clark and I are co-sponsoring. It is something that we, it's identified as a technology project because that's where the funding came in. It is much more than a technology project. And you guys will hear me say, technology is the fuel, it's not the destination. The destination is outcomes for state operations so that it works not only for us now, but in the future and our future workforce. And we need technology to be the means to get there.
Representative Savini, a term that you used, I think would be helpful. You talked about co-sponsoring.
Yes.
Just what does that mean?
The co-sponsoring means that, especially for a project this large, this is not an ADS project. ADS is not telling the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch how to do things, what to do. This is sponsored by our Secretary of Administration alongside me. So all decisions that are made are collective and collaborative with the two agencies that would ultimately be responsible for one, the business process operations side, and then the technology side. So
are all IT projects sponsored or sponsored?
This is the first one of its size that really went underway when I joined. The other ones prior were a little bit further underway. So my answer is no, not really. But each one of the projects does have representation from both. So there's always a business sponsor, there's always a tech sponsor, but as far as the executive sponsor goes, it's not always co. And for things this big, it should be. So,
Bailey?
Yeah, thank you. Are you overseeing the new state college computer system that they're planning on purchasing? Implementing?
What I don't know, it's you're referencing, but that entity doesn't fall under state government.
Okay.
Just want to say that 10 years ago or so, I found myself responsible for a number of software systems and hardware systems that would be 40 years old if I hadn't got rid of them 10 years ago. And we replaced them with an ERP. And you have a sympathetic ally in the complexities of that operation.
Thank you.
And I hope you don't have to sleep on the floor of your office for 20 straight nights like I did.
Been contemplated. It's a sensitive project. It really is. And it is, it's a people project. And Rep. Sibilia has been at the front seat of some of the work as well. So I think she can probably relate to the history, but we're in a good space at the moment, and we had an opportunity to look at the appropriations. And the appropriations were originally meant to pay for the tech and the implementation of the tech. And what we've done is we've looked at operations and we've looked at business process transformation. And so we've taken some of those funds and they are associated with some of the business process transformation that needs to happen, which is how do you know how other business offices are doing things and what they're using to do those things that will have to be absorbed into the system. And this is a chance for us to do the right thing for the government and not do the minimum of what's written. And we put the experts in place for a reason, and they need to bring all of their knowledge to the table.
So Representative Morrow, and then we're gonna have a little summary chat.
Yeah, I just see that we didn't get to the unemployment insurance, and that's a huge one for our constituents and clearly deficient on multiple levels.
So that relates
that's a
to my
whole
summary chat.
Separate.
Well, so we're trying to get a little bit of a plan here. So what I'm thinking in terms of a logical order of operation, as you were going through your presentation, Secretary, I sent a few links to our committee assistant to add to your testimony folder today.
Thank you.
Your annual report and the project overview. And we're out of time. So what I'd like to propose to you is that we have you come back at part 1. So we got to page 11. Maybe you could come back next week just to finish this 101. And we could continue going through your slide deck. Folks will have had a chance maybe to read those supporting materials by then. And then from there, one of the things I was hoping to do, and I don't know whether you'll accompany the agencies or how this will all work, but we need to hear from DMV. We need to hear from VDOL. We need to hear from other state agencies, get them in and have them tell us how their projects are going. And so this is we are launching on a journey here.
Yes.
So we're not going to have, I think we need to, in my way of thinking, we need to finish understanding ADS and your role. And then we can start learning agency by agency about their individual IT systems, where they are, how they're progressing. I think it makes sense to me anyway. So that is the current thought.
If I can make a recommendation, Deputy Secretary Delabriere is the one whose team manages the existing environment. What would be more top of mind to other secretaries and commissioners would be what they're working on now, what they're working towards now. And so there's some other projects that are either underway on that list of 63. But typically with their list of systems, it is my staff that would likely have a better idea of what's running and operating out there.
Yep. And we're also reaching out to a bunch of our colleagues in the legislature to find out what IT systems are top of mind for them in their committee's jurisdiction that they think we should look into.
Perfect.
So
excellent.
Great.
It's really wonderful to meet all of you.
Great to meet you too. To be continued. Thank you so much for coming in. We're happy to be here as a committee, and stay tuned for sure.
Thank you.
And our assistant will reach out to see if you could come back next week. So, all right, we're adjourned. Thank you. Go off live.
What road you got? 20 miles Steve Road.
Off of Scarbell. I'm on East Road. That's a little, just off Scarbell by the Nap Pond area. You know it?
We're still